Welcome back to another video. Hope you are having a great day. And today, to take a look at some laptops, we are going to cover power efficiency, performance and prices. We are going to cover Intel, AMD, Snapdragon and Apple chips, and the goal of the video is simple as by the end of this video that you will be able to decide which is the best computer for you, Windows or Mac OS, and without the need for any influencer to tell you, hey, this is the best computer that you can get at this moment, or this is the best computer because this and this. You will be able to tell for yourself and decide for yourself which is the computer to get, this one because of this and this and this at this price, or I don't want this one and this one and this one because it lacks this and this and this that I require, and probably cheaper than my choice. But the choice will be yours, and hopefully I will be able to share some data that will help with that decision. So let's go straight for it. And if you are watching this video on your Windows 10 or 11 computer and you still haven't activated and can't even edit your desktop icons, don't forget to check out DECkeysales.com, where we can find budget official OEM keys at an affordable price, and with the coupon code that you can see on screen and down below on the video description, it will get even cheaper. And besides Windows 11 Pro, if you are looking for Windows 10 or even an Office suite that we can aggregate directly to our Microsoft account, you can use the same coupon code, which will give you the best price possible at this moment. So just in case, the link will be down below. So this is a video that will take a while, so bear with me. There is some really interesting info right over here that I want to share with you, and I will leave some timestamps right over here so that you can follow for your favorite topic. But I do believe that all of them are interesting. Now we will start with this screen right over here, Copilot PCs. This is one of the premises that we are living today. Copilot PCs basically are computers that are smarter than the usual computer that we had so far. Now I will leave some actually I will leave all the links down below that we will cover here, and you can check out some of the features just in case you haven't heard of Copilot PCs. Now, to be a Copilot PC, it has one thing, which is the NPU, also known as Neural Processing Unit. And this is one of the things that we need to cover here on this video, because we have started to hear about this a few months ago, and the Snapdragon X Elite CPU, which I still haven't tested, but we have some results right over here, and hopefully will revolutionize some things along the way. But at this moment, having in my hand the new AMD AX 3070, which did surprise me, we need to cover a few things here and check out if the Snapdragon will be able to deliver and AMD will just stand like this and Intel the same, or even Apple. So having this in mind, NPU, we just need to check here the second page, Copilot PC minimal hardware requirements. So it says that to be a Copilot PC Plus, it needs 40 trillion operations per second, also known as TOPS. So we will need an NPU with 40 TOPS minimum. This one right over here at this moment has 50 TOPS, which is great. And if you are wondering, okay, Robert, but why do I need an NPU? I already have a CPU, I've got a GPU, I've got RAM, I've got an SSD and a display and whatnot. NPU, why? Now, NPU will basically help any computer to be able to perform tasks with AI without sending to the cloud. So at this moment, on any regular laptop, this is an exception because it's a Copilot Plus already. If I do any task that involves AI, it will send the information like ChatGPT and so on and so forth. So the info will need to go out to the computer. Once we have a Copilot Plus PC, we will be able to do those tasks internally. Now, this will be great, especially in business environments or academic, which I don't want to share, or I can't share my info and I can't risk. So I want to run all the necessary tools right over here. Now, Copilot PCs will have a great advantage in those tasks. And this is the premise of the video as well, doing some comparisons right over here. And then depending on your workflow, decide if you need a Copilot PC or not, because I will give you also at least one example of one laptop which is more powerful than any of the Copilot PCs that we are going to check out. So this will depend on our workflow and the tools that we use. Now, having this in mind, let's take a look at the new CPUs from Qualcomm, Snapdragon X Elite, which honestly, when I heard for the first time, I was really excited, because the promise is we are going to get into the market of Apple territory ARM CPUs, which are great performance. I love mine. And this one is a bit outdated. It only has the M1 Pro, but it's still a great CPU and it still delivers a lot. So when we heard about Snapdragon, really exciting news. Now, one of the questions that we will need to have, and I will show later on, is that at this moment the computers that are available with Snapdragon, especially on the Microsoft website, are not very clear about the version of the CPU that we are getting, and this is, in my opinion, a big flaw and something that should be clarified by Microsoft on their website and by the brand, so that we know exactly which CPU we are getting. Because as we will see in just a few moments, there is a big difference between this, and this one right over here. Actually, I don't have results for all of them yet. So these are the new Snapdragon CPUs that promise to be revolutionizing things. And honestly, a few months ago, I thought, okay, so Snapdragon is getting into this game with these CPUs. Will AMD and Intel just go down, or will they fight? And honestly, it was really quick, at least on AMD's side. We can see it right over here. This is the AMD AI AX 3075 and 3070. By the way, I've got here the Asus ProArt 16, which has the HX 370. Now, this is an awesome CPU, as we will be able to tell. But if you want to check out this laptop right over here, I will leave the link down below so that you can check all the tests that I did and I share with the community. Now, we can see right over here that there are 3 CPUs. I had the chance to test this one out. One of the things that we can see right over here is, if we go into the specifications, we will see that the NPU has 50 tops. Now, if we go back to the Snapdragon, it has 45 tops in terms of the NPU performance across every single CPU that they have. So here AMD is doing something which is not only going for the minimum, which is 40 tops for the Copilot Plus PCs, but surpassing that and going 50. Now, there is another model that we have seen, and some of the pages are in Portuguese. I'm Portuguese, as you are aware. I just recorded my video in Portuguese, so just have that in mind. But if we go right over here for the top model, it has 55 tops, so 10 tops more, 10 trillion per operations per second more than the Snapdragon. So I would say that even though the revolution might pass through ARM CPUs like Apple is doing, and in a great way, it's not yet there because AMD has a great answer. Now, looking at Intel, which is one of my favorite brands in terms of CPUs, at this moment still doesn't have any CPU that is Copilot Plus compatible. But Intel says that by the end of 2024, it will release Lunar Lake, which will have 45 tops. And this is really interesting. Now, Intel has one CPU, actually several CPUs that have also AI, and this is in Portuguese, but what matters here is that I did ask what is the specifications or tops for the Ultra 9 185H, and I got all the results for the specifications, but I just wanted the tops. And I did ask on Copilot because I didn't find any info on any of the websites. Actually, I did find some information. Some of them said that it had 10 tops, and right over here it says 34. So there is mixed information on the only CPU that Intel has at this moment of the recording with neural processing units. But even if it has 34, it's not enough to be the 40 tops minimum requirement for Copilot PC tasks and so on. So just have this in mind, and let's move on now with some benchmarks. Now, we will start with Geekbench because in my opinion it's a really easy way to read, but then we will deepen with other benchmarks, some real-world performance, and then we will go to the purchasing options. Now, right over here, I've got the result from this computer that it's on my front. This is the Asus ProArt P16, and it got a single-core score of 2,891 and multi-core score of 15,000, which is a lot for a laptop, and this is great to see by AMD. Or if it was Intel, I would be happy for Intel, or if it was Snapdragon, I would be happy as I am. But if I take a look right over here so that we have everything in perspective, the computer that I've got on my side, this is the MacBook Pro 2021. It has the M1 Pro. Now, this is a total capable machine, and if we take a look at the score, it has 10,367 on multi-core score, single core score a bit lower as we would imagine. But just to say that if you ask me, Robert, can you edit a video on that computer? Yes, I can without any issues whatsoever. So now imagine the result that we are getting right over here on the ProArt P16. If you ask me, can I edit a video right over here? Yes, I can. I did share the results. I did render a 4K timeline of 28 minutes in only 5 minutes and a 13-minute timeline in 2 minutes and a half, which is just huge. So a few years ago, I would go fully Mac because we have Final Cut and it was fully optimized for this machine, and rendering times and the Final Cut tool is great to use. But at this moment, we have some options. We have the CapCut app, which some of us love and some hate, DaVinci Resolve, and a lot more that are really simple to use and give us great results. So Mac OS and Final Cut Pro 10 at this moment with this kind of machine is not the only answer that we have for high demanding tasks like video editing, photo editing, 3D and so on. So really exciting news here at this moment by AMD with this CPU, which really surprised me. So this is the MacBook Pro. Let's move on to a Snapdragon, and this is on the VivoBook S15. I did not test out this computer, but this is a public test available on Geekbench, which I did search. Now my criteria was to find the latest results, and according to the date that you can see on the publishing of this video, you'll see that I'm recording and I did search for latest results, so August 23 in this particular case. Now if we take a look at the X Elite that is right over here, this is the 78100, and this is important and I will show you why. It's getting a result of 2500 more or less and 14,277, so lower than the AMD that we are seeing right over here, and also with less tops than the AMD. Now if we take a look at this result here, we will see that we have superior result, and this is also a Snapdragon. This is the 84100. So we are getting 2790 and 15,000 on a multi-core score. Now this one is exactly on par with the AMD CPU on the ProArt P16. So if we take a look again here on the Snapdragon lineup, we have the result for the 78100 and for the 84100. I did search around for the top of the line and no results yet, and I also searched for this one. I believe that there is a few of this one. I don't know if I didn't put here because I didn't find interesting enough, but I believe that there isn't. All of the results, I think it was 78-100 and 84-100, but I can't be 100% sure right now because I did search a lot. Now this is important, especially on the purchasing factor, as I said, but one thing to have in mind is that if you purchase a computer Copilot Plus with a Snapdragon, you really need to know which CPU you are getting. If you are getting the 78-100, then you will get one kind of performance, which is this one right over here. But if you are getting the second best of that list, you are getting a lot better performance, close to what AMD is delivering on the HX370. Now let's take a look at another example, and this time with an Intel CPU. Now this Intel CPU is the Ultra 9 185H, which I did put it here by only one reason. It is the only Intel CPU that has AI capabilities, at least 34 tops, and that was the reason. But besides having those 34 tops, which are not enough for Copilot Plus, in terms of performance, it's something that it's not that great actually compared to the AMD and Snapdragon solutions at this moment. So if you find a laptop with this CPU, it's totally fine, it's great, it's somewhat what we've got right over here in terms of the M1 Pro, but it's not on par with the AMD response and Snapdragon response. So just have this in mind. But if we are concerned about performance, then Intel still has a few things right over here, and namely with the Intel Core i9 14900HX, which is a CPU for laptops. And I will show an example of a laptop which is a beast with a 4090, and wow. So if I'm concerned about video editing and 3D modeling and whatever I want in terms of tasks and gaming and so on and so forth, and I don't need any NPU, I don't need a Copilot PC Plus because I'm not doing anything with AI on my own computer, then this might be a best solution instead of the new Copilot PC CPUs like the AMD or the Snapdragon or any other that comes around. So I believe that this is one of the things that we really need to have in mind when selecting a computer, and not following the rush of, hey, I really need a Copilot Plus PC. Now, if we need it, then we need it, and we should choose the best Copilot PC that we can for the price that it costs. But if I don't, then there are several options on the market, and Intel, while it's being left behind at this moment for the NPUs, it's still giving great performance right over here in terms of the multitasking and single tasking with this CPU. Now, there's something else that I would like to add before we move on, which is Snapdragon is ARM architecture. So it's different from the AMD and Intel CPUs at this moment, which are from the x86 platform. And one of the things that we have on Windows, and I'm not going to cover what had happened in the past with ARM CPUs and Windows because it was not good, so it doesn't matter. But one thing that we should have in mind is that all the apps that I'm talking about, CapCut, DaVinci Resolve, and everything that exists, or most, I would say 98% probably of the apps, are optimized for x86 platform, and we are talking about Intel and AMD. With the Snapdragon coming along, what needs to happen is what happened with Apple in a recent past, when they ditched Intel and went full ARM with Apple M1, Apple M2, and so on and so forth, which is some of the apps will be optimized now, and most of the apps will be emulated in the case of Macs using Rosetta, which is a protocol that automatically opens the app, not directly on bare metal, but it uses an emulation to be able to use the app. And some of the apps had actually worse performance than they had on Intel CPUs, at least at the beginning. So this is something to have in mind as well when we are acquiring a CPU with Snapdragon. For example, we have to expect, at least, and I'm not really sure that it will happen with all the apps, we might find some apps that will not work as well as they do at this time with x86. So I believe that this is something that we all should be aware. There is this phase that it's a transition, I would say. It's not even a transition, but developers will need to have a Photoshop version for x86 and a Photoshop version optimized for Snapdragon CPUs, which is at this moment the only supplier that I'm aware of, ARM for Windows. And this is something that will take some time until we have optimal performance across ARM and x86. Now, moving along from Windows and just taking a look right over here on this table, which is for Mac. Now, Mac on Geekbench is really simple to read, and I've been using it for, I don't know, for the past 15-16 years or so. Really easy when you look at the score, and then there are so few computers that we can choose that we know the kind of performance that we are dealing. And when we compare Macs with Windows computers on Geekbench, I will be able to tell, at least on video editing performance and After Effects, for example, Motion 5, which I can say, okay, 3000 of multi-core score, okay, that might be a good computer to take to school, to take notes and so on and so forth, but it will not be able to do tasks on video editing and rendering. It can render videos if we take a while, but editing itself, when we put in some effects and so on and so forth, and then the timeline doesn't move, if we look at those scores, really low scores, we know what we are getting into. If we go to 10,000 scores like we have right over here, then I know, okay, I've got a capable machine, and I also know that using Final Cut or CapCut or DaVinci Resolve, I will have some great results. Premiere is a bit more heavy on some tasks, but it's getting better and better, trying to push over because it's losing in some areas. Now, if we take a look right over here so that we have an idea, we have scores up to 21,000 with the M2 Ultra, but if we go to a more average score, like what we're having right over here, 15,000, we will be on the ballpark of the M2 Max, which is on the Mac Studio, or the MacBook Pro 16 inches with the M3 Pro. So in terms of raw performance, this is what we are comparing in terms of the Snapdragon, in terms of the AMD HX 370, and also the M3 Pro, M2 Max, and the Intel going a little bit below. But when we did compare the last Intel CPU, which we saw right over here, the i9 14900HX, we saw that the performance was superior. So we can have an idea of what we are getting when we compare to a Mac, because this is a legit question. On my day, I use Windows computer and I use macOS. If you ask me which is my favorite, it's really difficult. I love macOS and I love Windows. I did enjoy Windows 10, not as much, but I'm really enjoying Windows 11. So in my day-to-day, I need one of each, and it's not easy on the budget, but this is what I need. In your case, if you love macOS, then what kind of performance do you want to achieve? You can read it right over here. And if you want to go Windows, or if you want to choose your Windows computer, then what kind of computer and comparing to macOS will you be getting? There is one thing that might be an advantage, and we will see on the specifications and prices in just a few moments, which is usually this kind of computer, like the Asus ProArt P16, as besides a great CPU, also a dedicated GPU. In this particular case, we have a 4070 laptop GPU right over here, which is awesome. So if we are into gaming, then probably this is a best option than the MacBook Pro 16 inches with the M3 Pro, which CPU wise is the same performance, but for gaming is a different story. So this is another important factor to have in mind. And hopefully with Geekbench we are okay. Hopefully I did help out on that way. One of the things that I want to cover as well, because this is the CPU that the computer on my front has. This is the Ryzen AI 9 HX 370. And if we take a look, just a glimpse of an eye, because I also have an issue with this benchmark right over here, which I will cover in just a few moments. But if we take a look and have in mind that some results lower is better and some results higher is better, we can see that the Ryzen is taking the lead, or sometimes second place, and doing some really great results, which is not a surprise after testing out the CPU, after seeing what it's capable. And one of the first tests that I did was rendering out the 4K timeline, and I saw it really blasting away, and I thought, hey, wait, what's happening here? But there is one limitation that happens to us all, which is the hardware that it's comparing to right over here. It's not, in my opinion, of course, the best hardware to be compared, because we can see the Ultra 7 155, but I would love to see the 185 right over here, which is superior to this one. We would have better results. There is one or two right over here with the MacBook. I'm not really sure if it's this one or if it's the next one, but I would like to see more in-depth results, which is not. So there is a limitation in terms of the benchmark that we are seeing right over here, but I totally understand the limitations and why. In my particular case, I've got the AMD CPU right over here in my front and be able to test out everything. But in 1 month, probably I will have the Snapdragon X Elite, one of them at least, and I will not have this one, so it will be a bit more tricky. I will have to save some of the tests that I did right over here and then try to compare with the Snapdragon Elite. So I believe that it's not easy for everyone to get the hardware that it has. Now let's take a look at this one right over here, because it has a bit more choice, and then we will go to the purchasing pages and see the differences that we might get in terms of computers. Now for Cinebench 2024, we can see right over here that in terms of multi-core score, and let's go a bit up. That was not the first result that I wanted to show. Single core score on Cinebench 2024, we can see right over here that Apple is taking the lead, and then followed by the i9 14900HX, and then we have the Snapdragons right over here, and then AMD Ryzen right over here. It's not a big difference between the Snapdragon and the AMD, but it is quite a large difference from the M3 Pro in terms of the Cinebench. So we will need to have in mind Geekbench, Cinebench, which are the most reliable benchmarks for CPUs, but then we will need to face these results against proper functions in Photoshop or video editing in Premiere and DaVinci Resolve and CapCut and Final Cut and whatnot to have a real idea of what it delivers. But here we will have a really good ballpark. So comparing the AMD Ryzen with the M3, at this moment we have 24% more performance, and you can check that when you move around. It will change the percentage with the CPU that we are getting. By the way, if I haven't mentioned, I will leave all these links down below so that you can check out for yourself and spend a little bit more time searching around and see for yourself. Now, if we take a look at these results right over here in terms of efficiency, we can browse around for these, but we will see that Apple M3 is the most efficient CPU, followed by Qualcomm Snapdragon, and then the AMD right over here, Intel CPUs right over here, and then AMD below, Qualcomm right over here. So the only thing that I would like to take right over here is that Apple, in terms of efficiency, is still doing a better job than anyone else, and the difference is a bit huge. If we take a look at 198 points, and it doesn't matter what this means, if it takes 1 day to discharge the laptop, if it takes 2 days, 200 points. Now, comparing 200 points with 78 on the Snapdragon, it is a lot. We are talking about 153% more than the Snapdragon in terms of efficiency. And if we take a look at the AMD, we are talking about 217%, which is a lot. Now, comparing the AMD with the Snapdragon, the difference is not that much, especially when we have different results right over here. So 71, 78 compared with 62. This is not a huge difference comparing the Snapdragon with the M3 Pro, which is on the same architecture. So Snapdragon and M3 Pro are both ARM, while AMD is on the x86 platform, which we know that it's not as efficient as ARM CPUs, which are the same that we use on our mobile phones. So this is interesting to see, and honestly I was a bit surprised when I saw these numbers, because I thought that Snapdragon was a bit above and it was trying to reach out on Apple territory, not only in terms of performance, which is not there yet, but also in terms of efficiency, which is not there yet, as we can see. So Snapdragon, although might be doing a great job in terms of revolutionizing things, AMD and probably Intel, and we will see in just a few months, are doing a great job to keep up, at least with Snapdragon. With Apple chips, the story is a bit different. Now, if we take a look at one of the other results, we can check a few because we have right over here. These are the consumption, the ones that consume more. So lower is better. AMD is losing right over here. So as I said, x86 consumes is less efficient than ARM platform, and we have more or less the opposite result right over here. So the first place is for the last, is for the one that spends more energy while doing the same tasks. And if we go down, we can see the multi-core score. We only saw the single core score, but we can see that in terms of multi-core score, we have the Intel CPU that we talked before going ahead, and forget about the M3 Pro on the Apple, forget about the AMD CPU that we have on this machine right over here, and forget the Snapdragon. They all be smoked out by this one right over here. So Intel leading the way here, and then AMD is right over here, Snapdragon just following by 100 points difference more or less, so 7% difference between Snapdragon and AMD, but AMD leading the way, which shouldn't be like this according to the news on Snapdragon X Elite and so on and so forth. But we also have another result right over here which is lower, and this is also depending on the device that it's doing. Now this is the exact machine that I've got right over here. This is a 13 inches laptop, which I haven't tested, but we can see some interesting results right over here. We also have the M3 Pro with lower results than the AMD, lower results than the Snapdragon. So really interesting results right over here on the Geekbench 2024. So each brand also tries to optimize their machines for some of the benchmarks that are on the market, and that's why we can't rely only on benchmarks. We really need to test out on video editing and so on and so forth to see if they really deliver what they promise. But hopefully with these benchmarks you will have a better idea of what kind of laptop is here, what kind of laptop is here. If you go with the higher end, then you will know in which level you will be. On the Windows side, the same thing. Using AMD or Snapdragon or Intel, you will have a ballpark on where you are in terms of performance. It doesn't matter if you are using Cinebench or Geekbench, which is, in my opinion, easier to read with some really great results in terms of what's the benchmark and what's the real world performance. So hopefully this chapter is closed. Now let's take a look at some purchasing options. Now let's start with a Copilot Plus official computer, which is Copilot Plus PC. Now this is the Microsoft website, and I live in Portugal, but I did put in the English side version because obviously here the audience is different from my Portuguese channel. Now it starts at $999.99, but for the X Plus version. Now the X Plus version, it's easy to detect. If we go to the Snapdragon website, we have the Snapdragon X Plus, which has 10 cores and so on and so forth, and it has 45 NPUs. So we have exactly the CPU, or we know exactly the CPU that we are getting. But if I decide and go for the Snapdragon X Elite, 12 cores with OLED display, I can then select with 16 and 1 terabyte, or 32 gigabytes of RAM and 1 terabyte SSD. But my issue right over here is only one. Which of the Snapdragon Elite CPU am I getting? Because this is the 12 core, but if we go to the Snapdragon X Elite table, we will have 4 options here. So am I getting this one, or am I getting this one, or this one, or this one? Now obviously this one and this one are still not out yet on any machine, at least that I'm aware, but this one and this one is, because we have seen some reviews on Surface machines and we have seen some benchmarks on Geekbench website. So we know the result for this one, we know the result for this one, but my criticism is, where is the info stating that I'm getting X or Y CPU Snapdragon X Elite? Because there are 4 different models. We don't have the information right over here. Now, I would suggest, in my opinion, if I really wanted a Surface Pro Copilot PC Plus, which I believe that it's a great machine with some really nice specifications, if you don't need a dedicated GPU, I would either ask Microsoft to let me know which is the CPU that I'm getting, or purchase it with one step behind, because if I receive the lowest end Snapdragon X Elite, then I would probably send back because I didn't want that kind of performance, especially having other options on the market that we are reaching out higher performance values and with higher TOPS values. So this is something to have in mind if you are going to a Surface Pro Copilot Plus. Now let's take a look at the computer that I've got in front of me. Now this is in Portuguese and it's easier to read. We just need to take a look at the specifications. Now it has the AI HX 370 and it has 81 TOPS, which is a bit confusing as well. Now Asus here should fix this, because the NPU has 50 TOPS and then the CPU has the other 31 TOPS, which I should separate. If it was me, I would put in this message really clear, and if you go to the AMD website, you will have that info right over there. But besides the great CPU, it also has a external GPU. So we are talking about a RTX 4070. If we want to play games, if we want to do anything more demanding on the GPU, we will be able to do so in a different way than we will be able to do on a Snapdragon, for example, which has a great GPU for what I've seen, but it's nothing compared with the 4070. Now in this particular case, it also has 64 gigabytes of RAM and 2 terabytes of SSD. And then it has a lot more stuff, the Asus dial pad and so on and so forth, which we are not going to cover. It also has a stylus, so it's all add-ons, but it's also more expensive, 3,300 euros, and more or less the same in US dollars. Now for those that live in the US, just one difference, because our prices right over here include VAT and all the taxes and whatnot, so we don't have the price before taxes like you do in US. So just have in mind that you need to remove the tax to have a comparable price from euros to US dollars. Just have that in mind. And now let's go to one of my favorite websites, which is the Apple website. Now I've got 2 tabs here on Apple, just so that we can see the difference that I was trying to explain. When we see it in dollars, the same laptop and so on and so forth, 16 inches with the M3 Pro, this one right over here that costs say 2,900 US dollars, costs here in Europe, at least in Portugal, 3,559. Why? Because it has all the taxes included, and it says right over here that taxes represent 668 euros. So have this in mind when you look at prices in Europe, because we have the taxes included. included. But taking a look here, and if I wanted to configure a machine similar to the Asus that I had, and let's do it in euros actually because it's easier. The Asus cost 3,300 euros. So what I would have here on the MacBook Pro side with the M3 Pro would be a machine with 3,560 euros more or less, but it only has 36 gigabytes of RAM instead of the 64, and it only has 512 gigs instead of the 2 terabytes. But we know how Apple works in this particular case. I've got a machine here with 16 gigabytes of RAM. It was about 2,400 euros when I did purchase it, brand new, and it has the M1 Pro. So it's a bit outdated, but still a great machine. Like this machine right over here, if we've purchased it today, in 2 years will be outdated, but it's still a great machine to use for 5, 6, 10 years if we need. But if I wanted to configure a machine similar to the one that I've got here, we would need to jump to 4,300 and something euros. And if I wanted to upgrade memory, I would need to upgrade CPU, probably. No, this one already has the M3 Max, but if I select the previous version, I will need to select a CPU upgrade because it will not allow me to choose more memory with the CPU, which I find ridiculous, but okay, Apple is like this in some of the decisions that they do. But if I upgrade the CPU, then I will be able to go up to 96 gigabytes of memory, and if I go to 2 terabytes, I will get a computer for 5,735. So if we compare this machine right over here with this one right over here, it's more or less half of the price. But the truth is that if I really need the MacBook Pro for something and I really need this one for myself, then I will purchase, and then I will decide if I go with 16 inches or if I go with this or if I go with that. Now, to wrap things up, this is a computer that it's not available in Portugal, at least yet. This is the Rockstrix Scar 16. Now, I did put this one right over here because it has the i9 processor 14900HX, which we have seen that from all these that we have talked about is the fastest one in terms of CPU, but it doesn't have any NPU, so it can't be called a Copilot PC Plus, and we don't have the prices here, but I'm sure that it will not be cheap. So if you search around, you will find it. In Portugal, if you are here, by the way, we don't have this model, but there are computers with this CPU right over here, which if I had to choose one computer with multitasking performance in mind, and if I don't need NPU for Copilot Plus apps and tasks and so on and so forth, then this would probably be the CPU that I would be looking for. And forget about Copilot PC in this case, just go full performance, and then in a few years, if I really need an NPU, then I will change laptop and so on and so forth. So this is it. This is a really interesting time for those that are tech enthusiasts and love to know what type of technology we have, regardless if you are going to buy a laptop or not. But what can I achieve with this, and what can I achieve with this, and what can I get with this amount of money, and what can I get with this amount of money. Now, in a quick way, if I want a computer with a great performance, with a dedicated GPU, then I will need to look around, at least at this moment, for AMD, which looks to me the best option at this moment for all this spec, for the money that we pay. If I need the same kind of performance on the Mac ecosystem, then I would jump to the M3 Pro, probably 16 inches or 14 inches, depending on my budget, or I would wait a while to see what comes on the next Mac Mini. I also have one right over there which is not turned on, and my Mac Studio right over there. So as you can see, I love Mac machines, I love Windows machines. Hopefully this video did help you to see what we have in terms of performance, efficiency and prices at this moment, and for the next few months this is what we will have in terms of computers. If that was the case, don't forget the usual thumbs up right over there, which is really appreciated on this side of the screen. My name is Roberto Jorge, and as always, I'll see you on the next one.